When my normally adorable cat Biscuit bit my ankle in a playful stalking exercise gone wrong, I washed it with soap and some rubbing alcohol, slapped on a Band-Aid, and went about my day. The next morning, when it was swollen, I told myself it was probably just a hematoma, and went about my day. The next day, when the swelling had increased and red lines started creeping up my leg, I called my doctor. Long story short, I ended up hospitalized for intravenous antibiotics. This is all to say that yes, I'm sort of an idiot, but also to introduce the idea that maybe I minimized my very obvious lymphangitis because I am a man. This week, empirical evidence that men downplay their medical symptoms and that manlier men downplay them even more. I'm going to talk to you about a study that links manliness, or scientifically speaking, male gender expressivity, to medical diagnoses that are based on hard evidence and medical diagnoses that are based on self-report. I think you see where this is going, but I want to walk you through the methods here because it's fairly interesting. First things first, this is a study using data from the US National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health. This study enrolled 20,000 adolescents who were in grades 7 to 12 in the 1994 to 1995 school year and has been following them ever since, about 30 years so far. The authors wanted to link early gender roles to longer-term outcomes, so they cut that 20,000 number down to the 4,230 males in the group who had complete follow-up. And now comes the first interesting question. How do you quantify the male gender expressivity of a boy in 7th to 12th grade? There was no survey item that asked them how masculine or manly they felt. What the authors did was look at the surveys that were administered and identify the questions on those surveys where boys and girls gave the most disparate answers. I have some examples here. Some make sense when it comes to gender expressivity. How often do you cry, for example, has a lot of validity for the social construct that is gender. But some questions where boys and girls gave very different answers, like how often do you exercise, don't quite fit that mold. Regardless, this structure allowed the researchers to take individual kids' responses to those questions and combine them into what amounts to a manliness score, how much their answers aligned with the typical male answer. The score was established in adolescence, which is interesting, as I'm sure some of this stuff may change over time, but notable because adolescence is where a lot of gender roles develop. Now, we can flash forward 30 years and see how these manliness scores link to various outcomes. The authors were interested in fairly common diseases: diabetes, hypertension, and hyperlipidemia. And let's start simply. Are males with higher gender expressivity in adolescence more or less likely to have these diseases in the future? Not really. Those above the average in male gender expressivity had similar rates of hypertension and hyperlipidemia as those below the median. They were actually a bit less likely to have diabetes. But that's not what's really interesting here. I told you that there was no difference in the rate of hypertension among those with high versus low male gender expressivity, but there was a significant difference in the answer to the question, do you have hypertension? The same was seen for hyperlipidemia. In other words, those with higher manliness scores are less likely to admit, or perhaps know, that they have a particular disease. You can see the relationship across the manliness spectrum here in a series of adjusted models. The x-axis is that male gender expressivity score, and the y-axis is the percent of people who report having the disease that we know they have based on the actual laboratory tests or vital sign measurements. As manliness increases, the self-report of a given disease decreases. Now, there are some important consequences of this systematic denial. Specifically, men with the diseases of interest who have higher male gender expressivity are less likely to get treatment. And as we all know, the lack of treatment of something like hypertension puts people at risk for bad downstream outcomes. Putting this all together, I'm not that surprised. Society trains boys from a young age to behave in certain ways, to hide emotions, to eschew vulnerability, to not complain when we're hurt. And those lessons can persist into later life. Whether the disease that strikes is hypertension or Pasteurella multiseta from a slightly psychotic house cat, men are more likely to ignore it, to their detriment. So gents, be brave. Get your blood tests and check your blood pressure. And if there's something wrong, admit it and fix it. After all, fixing problems, that's a manly thing, right? For Medscape, I'm Perry Wilson.